Hey Ram,
Hey
good
Navneet,
morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great as well. So let's get started. So why can't we just introduce ourselves? So floor is yours.
All right. Hello everyone. This is Ram Kumar Notat. I go by Ram. I'm a solutions architect focusing on analytics services and a part of AML services. And I do help a lot of customers, especially with various in US East, with various solutions related to analytics and AML. So happy to be here. Excited to be here to look at what all questions you all may have and help with anything that I can. Over to you, Navneet.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm from warm California. It's so not warm these days, but yeah, I like to call it warm. So this is Navesh Shukla. I'm a solution architect specialized in analytics, been with AWS from 4+ years now. So kind of old in AWS world. And we are here to talk to you, get your question answered. If we are not able to answer, we try to do a follow-up with different mediums. So let's see if there are any questions which we have. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, right? And again, right, we wanted to have as this conversational as possible. So is it like really nice if we will be watching the chat, and if you have any questions, just put it there. So I see there is a one question from the Mani Shankar. Hey, where I can find the documentation for connecting Prometheus or Grafana? So are we looking to connect to which service are we looking to? We're looking to for EMR, for Redshift, or any other services which you're talking here. I believe there are documentations being available. We're able to share those documentation, but it's nice to know which service you're looking to use to monitor with using these services. So we'll find the documentation for you and then share here in this chat. Okay, so Ram, I think maybe I can ask you. So based like how based based on your experience, like okay, how customer is using AWS Analytics?
So I think when we say AWS Analytics, right, it's typically when anything that revolves around data. That's when analytics services and rest of the services come together to help with those use cases. So it could be anything to store, process, integrate, and get final insights on the data because everything starts with a business use case, right? So anytime there is a data problem or something that we want to a business problem where we want to get insights or we want to actionize something, that's when the whole list of services comes into picture. And it doesn't just stop with analytics. It's typically it goes the way it goes is AWS for data, right? So it could be databases, it could be analytics, it could be AML services, all work together to form that. So I've seen customers doing that end-to-end pipelines a lot with ease because of that close integration these various services has. And for example, one of the customers were using these various services to identify the health of the utility poles because a fun fact is woodpecker might be one of the reasons which is causing the problem for your utility poles, right? So identifying that is not a simple task. So it's a lot of them historically was done manually. So there are a lot of automation that you can do. There are a lot of analytics and machine learning you can bring in for such use cases where you can get these images, whether it's satellite images or helicopter based images that you can get and run analytics on top of that and get to the insights quickly than doing a lot of these things manually. And this is just one out of several hundreds of thousand use cases that we have at hand.
So that's perfect. So one thing is usually what I'm seeing here in the field is there's a lot of migration happening, and especially from Hadoop of the world, right? So I see there are customers, they run this vanilla Hadoop flavor. There are customers, they are running enterprise Hadoop on the EC2 or on the on premises, and they wanted to, when I say Hadoop, primarily and Hadoop and then Spark workload, we're talking, and I see like, hey, they are interested to move to AWS, whereas when they start exploring AWS, they find there are a bunch of services which is being available which support Spark. EMR is one of them. Glue is other, and then now with an Athena, we're also having the Spark. So how you usually guide customer, how to get started, and what service they should be using. Are they using all of them? They should be using EMR as compared to Glue, as compared to Athena. So what's your general take?
Hey, thank you. Thanks for that question. Actually, that's a question. Glad you asked that because that's a question that comes up a lot with my customers as well. Because the good part with AWS, the various services within AWS stack, is the flexibility that you have to pick any of the tools that you want, which is appropriate for the use case that you have at hand, right? And for that reason, there are overlaps in functionality that various services offer, but that really fits into the various use cases that you have at hand for each one of these services. For example, let's take the example that you mentioned about migration to EMR from Hadoop, or it could be a customer evaluating whether it should be EMR or Glue, right? So a couple of things that we want to look at, we want to think from is one, are we looking at a migration effort that's from a typical ETL tool, right? A drag and drop ETL tool. If that's the case, it's a lot easy for the users because it all depends on the end user persona. All these various tools are catering to the various end users and the various personas. So, for example, let's say Glue can be an easy fit for someone who is trying to migrate from the ETL tools, where you have a drag and drop option, but still you have the flexibility to get the actual code as you drag and drop, right? You can still generate the code, and you have an option to go ahead and edit those customs, bring in custom scripts or edit the scripts that is getting generated. So that's one way to look at the Glue migration. And of course, it is serverless, and where you don't have to worry about managing the servers and things like that. Now, when it comes to EMR, for example, a lot of EMR migrations, EMR becomes a default choice for a lot of customers when they think of Hadoop migrations, like you mentioned. Because if you have a Hadoop stack, typical Hadoop stack, and the various components within that Hadoop stack, it's an easy migration process for such customers to EMR because you get the exact same feel on EMR with a lot more features and flexibility out there. So that's another aspect to look at. Now, with EMR, because you have an option to specify which version of EMR and you have clear idea of which version of Spark that particular EMR is associated with, you have that little bit additional control on which version you pick and things like that. Now, if you are a person who is really interested in that level of control, then of course EMR is a choice that you want to go with. But if you want to stay a little hands off and you are looking for a Spark engine, you have, or you want to migrate from an existing drag and drop tool, then maybe Glue is a choice, right? Now, the new persona or what we have learned from the some of the recent discussions with our customers is a lot of customers who are business analysts who are doing a lot of SQL based querying. They also want to do a lot of transformations using Spark. So for such customers, Athena with Spark would make a lot of sense. So because they have one single tool to go for that.
Yeah, so if I understood in very layman language, I think that's a very good segue to take a question as well. We got a question from Sanjeev, and he asked, like, hey, what is your opinion when building analytics solution? Like, we have serverless options like Glue, and we have EMR as a class, and how we can choose the services is depend upon the use cases. There are some regards, some standards with some You know, I think this is a very good segue to take this question. Maybe I can try to give a jab here. So, uh, how usually my customer work, and then I work with an enterprise segments, and again, right, as Ramesh mentioned, when you're moving from an existing infrastructure, right, there are two choices you have. Either you're looking to do a lift and shift. Hey, I'm running this infrastructure in XYZ platform, and I have this, you know, requirement to do a cost saving where friendly customers, and I wanted to have more flexibility, etc. Right. So, and I wanted to have this quick migration without me worrying about refactoring my code or without me worrying about refactoring my architecture, etc. Uh, that's where I see lot more and more organization is moving from their on-premises or the workloads which they are running on EC2 to managed services like EMR. Once they are in in the in the once they are in the cloud, and that's where your journey start, right? It's not like and I can give you an example. One of my customers, they have migrated bunch of their Hadoop workload to an EMR, and when you run on EMR offers you a lot of flexibility in terms of when you run your workload. For instance, you can have your persistent cluster, in the same time you can have a transient cluster. So if you have a workload which is not very, think of which is more on ETL kind of a nature, or it run on a Spark workload, right, where you do not need to have a 24 into 7 server up and running. You can have easily being migrated to transient cluster. However, transient cluster is being built or is being recommended to use for one or two applications. Again, right. So when you're running your ETL or Spark job on the transient cluster, you do not need to worry about creating a lot of knobs which you had when you were running with a cluster where you will be sharing resources with many other applications, right? So that's where, like, it's get really interesting. So I have seen customers, they run the workload which they migrated from the on premises and they run on the transient cluster. And when they run on transient cluster, they run with all the Spark Summit configuration which they used to run with their on premises, and they end up, hey, we are not getting that performance which we're supposed to get because we are putting that much of resources, right? So again, answer to your question, Sanjeev, is like it's a multi-part journey, right? And again, it's on your organizations where they started. So it's a lift and shift, then moving towards the similar kind of infrastructure will be helpful. But if it's more on a modernization effort, hey, we wanted to use services like EMR serverless, or we wanted to use AWS Glue. Again, it's in serverless for my Spark workload, which I know, which I have identified, and my motive is to reduce operational overhead. And I have a team of engineers; they're focused more on the business side of the world than me on worrying about using or managing the infrastructure. Whereas if you have a set of engineers, they are very proficient in running that infrastructure. They know how their code actually works, and they wanted to have much more knobs and controls to run their infrastructure. That's where the EMR comes into picture. Hope that helpful. Okay. Let me read another question for you, Ram. So there is a question from Ram Babu, and the question is there any tool in AWS data analytics space to convert traditional ETL job from the informatical talent, etc., to Glue?
Okay, so thanks for that question. So it, there are some migration programs and there are some tools that are available, not as a native tool, but at the same time we do have partners whom we work with, which can help you in migrating the jobs from, let's say, Talent or Informatica to Glue. One such tool is Leap Logic, and that's something that we have seen working pretty well with multiple customers that I have worked with. So if this is something of your interest, please do let us know. We'll be more than happy to get more documentation around that and get some connects and work with you on that. But we have seen that's something that can bring in a lot of automation.
Right, right. So, and you mentioned about that ETL migration program which we have. So Ram, either we can reach out to you, or you, if you have your AWS salesperson, or if you have your organization as an AWS salesperson, ask them to reach out to us, and if we can guide them to the right partners, which helping them in that migration journey. So maybe there's a next question. I was hoping to have a question around Gen AI. So so that's there was a question here. So this question is from the Narendra Babu, and he asked like, hey, can we use ChatGPT for AWS services monitoring and AI capabilities added to developing tool to help developers write efficient code, VS Code, like VS Code is offering. So the very loaded question. What do you think, Ram?
So again, I think don't want to go into the specifics on whether you can use so and so tool, right? Rather, I think we should look at the use case at hand. If you're looking at any of the Gen AI use cases, there are multiple options that you can implement that with the native AWS stack itself. For example, there are pre-built models, foundation models, LLMs that are available in SageMaker, which you can use to build your Gen AI models. Similarly, you might have seen some of the announcements that had happened recently on Bedrock. That's another solution where you can build any of the AI, Gen AI use cases. But it will be great if we can discuss on some of the use cases, and we'll be more than happy to connect with you as well on that.
I think it was primarily more around the monitoring. So, uh, there is we do not know if there are any, at least to my knowledge, if my Ram know, are there any LLMs which is being available to integrate with AWS services for monitoring, right? So we don't know that answer. Other is you talked about AI capabilities, right? To write an efficient code like VS Code. So we do have something called Code Whisperer, and I tried out that Code Whisperer last week, I believe, and to write some Spark code just to try out how that worked. And to my surprise, that worked very effectively. Having said that, I'm not at all a code whisperer expert, but maybe this is the service which we wanna explore. It has an integration with the Python, Java, and I like and I am able to write the PySpark code as well. So all these things work, and I have used like it is being integrated with your VS Code, so you can have that being added to your VS Code that you're able to write. So that's nice. Okay. I see there are no other questions. Maybe we can continue our discussion. Right. So one thing which I'm hearing a lot around these days is around, and especially right now we are talking about Gen AI or exploration of the Gen AI, and then AI ML in general, right? So there's a term called garbage in, garbage out, which has been very famous in a software industry as well as in the data world, right, and in data analytics. So I'm hearing a lot of buzz around the data quality, and recently Glue has announced AWS Glue data quality. So can you just talk about data quality in general and how customers are implementing data quality in AWS?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that question. So, data quality. Anytime. See the challenge in building a data lake or bringing in multiple sources and putting all that data together without having right quality data is it will become a data dump, and you will not be able to consume it well. So that governance that you should have when it comes to data quality, when it comes to cataloging, that is so important for you to truly utilize your data, right? And that's exactly the reason why you will see a lot of emphasis on the recent announcements on those aspects, like governance aspects and the data quality aspects of it. And glue data quality is one such feature that got released recently. So the way it works is, as a user, you have an option to bring in the data quality in multiple ways, because there could be cases where you already have data and you want to make sure that you are bringing in the quality checks to the data that you already have. So that's a data quality at rest, right? Whereas there are pipelines that you are building where you want to put in data quality as and when the data is coming. So that's another way to look at data quality, so that you are not allowing data that is not up to the mark into your system itself. So those are the two ways you can implement data quality.
Can you just give an example, right? What do you mean by data quality at transit? Like that's like, let's say I have built this pipeline where I'm bringing the data from any relational data store and then having the data being stored into S3. So
Mhm.
what all data quality check I can put on that the data pipeline?
Yeah. So for example, I've seen data with age with negative numbers. So that's those are some of or date of birth with 9999 as the year. So there are so many such default values that get added in our operational systems for whatsoever reason, right? The way it is coded, the way prefill works, there could be cases like that. So what happens is that data, once the data gets in, when that flows to the next system or the data lake, we should have an easy option to find out, hey, if it's an age column and who's applying for a loan, then that person should be at least so and so, let's say 80, right? 18 and above. So that's a quality check. If not, there is something wrong with the data or with the process, right? So that's a check that we can put in. Or the date of birth should be from so and so time frame, or the amount that has been requested is from so and so. And there are so many checks that we can do when the data is coming in through the system, and each one of these can be configured very easily with a new construct that is developed. Because one thing that we understood when we were rolling out this feature is there is no existing because we all know SQL to query the data, right? But similarly, there is no good construct that is available to implement a data quality check. So that's why if you look at the Glue data quality, there is a construct that is defined there to put in your checks, which is called DQDL. So you can define, it's a very simple construct where you can define what is the expectation for the specific columns that you have, uh, or you can even provide a SQL as one of the criteria and say that I want this column to satisfy the condition that is given by this SQL statement. So once you put that in, you can use that data quality check as and when the data is coming in, and you can take actions based on that. You can say that I want this job to be cancelled or aborted when it is not meeting the criteria. Or you can say that, hey, it generates a CloudWatch event, I want someone to get notified, this producer system to get notified that, hey, the data that you sent is not matching with the quality checks that we have at hand. So you can take actions on that and then proceed depending on your business use case.
Perfect.
So I know while we wait for the next question, right? Or do we have any question? Let me ask you that first.
No, I don't see any questions here.
Okay, so while we wait for that, I have a question. So I know you have been engaged with a lot of interesting use cases, with of course with analytics services and other services as well. So what is one of the most interesting ones that you have worked on recently?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. There are so many. Uh, Primarily, let me think. So I've been working with a customer, and the ask was, hey, we were We are a bunch of we are an org where we do not have a think of like very deep engineering culture, right?
No.
We are an org where we primarily focus on our products and our services, and we are not a technology company. They were very upfront about it, and how you can help us to understand the value of cloud, how you help us to help in the migration, and the same time, right? Educate our team on AWS services. And it was daunting, right? Hey, everyone is talking about cloud, and we are. It feel like we are we are as an org, we are not there yet. So, and when you work in a customer where they do not have that engineering culture, and then you have such services, right, where we are so deep in terms of uh, features and the technology. So idea was to how they able to kind of gain a confidence, and I think that's where I have learned the power of cloud. So we started with the organization where we try to understand, hey, how we able to help you to solve, start with an easy task, which you can think of maybe the value added. What they said is we have this audit database running and on premises where we are paying a lot of licensing cost for running that audit database to an enterprise organization, and we wanted to see if we able to migrate this database to AWS. And you have said something around like working backward, or in AWS we have a culture called working backward to understand what the use case is all about. And I said like, okay, who all are accessing this database? Like, was the you know all I have asked like, okay, how many user, or what's the concurrency requirement to look like? What's the latency requirement to look like? How much data is getting get scanned, etc., etc. So I can help them to do the right database. To my surprise,
No.
they said like, hey, this is being hardly being used because this is an audit database, and only once the auditor comes in picture, they go and run a bunch of queries, or only if there are issues, our IT department go and look this one, and this is being set by vendor, so we do not have much insight. But the ask is like not to this database is not being used, and we are paying a lot for it.
Got
So
it.
and I said like, what all logs you collect? They said like, okay, we collect bunch of logs from different systems, which that is being get put into this one, and this is a kind of black box for us. So what we did is we just simply did a POC where they had a bunch of systems or their applications which will be kind of transmitting those logs, and we have pointed those applications just to put those logs into S3 and have those logs being stored into S3, and thereafter be able to catalog the data in using AWS Blue Data Catalog, and then we ask them to just write a SQL query using a Keynote.
Yeah.
Literally, we have replaced the entire database. It's not very complex use case, but it show you if you use a right, if you use a in a cloud in the right way, it will save you ton of cost. And it literally blows your mind because now they hardly paying less than $50 just to run this entire end-to-end infrastructure and be able to access the data at any point of time, and they have full control who's having access, who's accessing what data to expose, what data not to expose, how the data look like. And again, right, in S3 we have something called intelligent tiering itself. By enabling S3 intelligent tiering, which is good use case for a data lake, it will be it will be moving the data from different tiers of S3 bucket, and ensuring they are not paying a lot on the even a reduced cost of S3. They are not paying a lot. So I think that was one of the use cases which always I always cherish when I talk about customers.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for that, Navneet. I think that's an interesting use case and a good way to how to save cost for the customer, right? Hey, there is another question that has come up here. So, is there any tangible out of the box solution for ML AI ops that can be implemented at organization level? Would you like to pick that?
I think you are in luck because SageMaker has just announced capabilities around it. I don't have much insight. Maybe we are able to find, and I think there is a workshop too to have that MLOps being implemented using SageMaker. So I'm more on the analytics side of the world. So but that's what I have read about it. So maybe we can share that link with you, and you can try to find some more details and kind of share the details with you. If that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think SageMaker does provide that end-to-end MLOps pipelines that you can easily implement at the enterprise level, where you have the capability to monitor the models and the various versions and deployments that are happening or any drifts that are happening. All those together, you can have an end-to-end solution out there. And we'll be more than happy if you would like to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to connect with specific contacts who can give you an overview and a walkthrough of what all it can do.
Right. So there is a question, very interesting question. Ashish, just to let you know, you missed one language there. We also support array in a AWS glue. But let me read this question for you, Ram. So Ashish is asking, considering that most AWS services support multiple runtimes slash languages, why are glue jobs restricted to Python, Spark, Scala, and PySpark? Maybe we should be asking Shift about it.
So, yeah. So again, it all goes by the feedback that we get from the customers, right? So something that I can very confidently say is, depending on the feedback that we get from customers, the various service teams pretty quickly act on that. And when we look at the use cases that are coming up and the features that customers are looking for, a lot of them are towards that, and I believe that is one of the reasons why you are seeing more and more focus on that area. And of course, like Navneet said, uh, a lot of customers told that it's a bit difficult to run plain Python code and run their machine learning workloads and things like that, and that's why Ray came into picture, right? So similarly, if there are specific needs, please do let us know. We have a mechanism to take those inputs from customers like you all, and that's exactly what we look at when we plan the features that are coming out. So please do let us know what specific needs that you have, and we'll be more than happy to put in that request and bring that to the attention of the various services that are out there.
And one more thing, like definitely that feature request is a critical part to have, but also you have to understand the glue, like the origination of the glue service was there, and when it was started back in 2017, 2018 time frame, the whole intention was to have a glue to provide a place where you're able to run your PySpark code. So the foundation itself is on a Spark, right? So and when we say foundation is on Spark, then you will be must be asking why we do not support Java, right? But it was intentional because primarily most customers been developing their Spark code on either PySpark or on Scala. So that is being supported. But again, right, we as Ram has mentioned, if there are need from the customer where they wanted to run a distributed Python, they have brought the array into picture. So if you have very specific need, definitely reach out to your account manager, and then they will be opening a feature request on your behalf, and then they will be communicating with the product team. So
Another question, Navneet, on how can I learn more about the various AWS services. Um, So I think there are maybe I can start and you can add, Navneet. There are various ways in which you can learn more about these services. I would surely start with things like immersion days or webinars that are available. So if you go to, we'll post the link for some of those events as well in the chat. So if you can go there, you will see the various events that are happening, and depending on the type of services that you're looking for, or the type of use cases that you're looking for, or industries that you're looking for, you'll be able to look at the webinars and the immersion days. The reason why I was initially suggesting that immersion days is that gives you a good mix of the theory part of it as well as hands-on activities. So that's a good way to learn about these services. And there are parts like certifications and other things that you can take. There are white papers and blogs and product documentation that is available if you are a person who would like to read more and then get to know things. So those are the options that you can go with.
Right. So there are something called workshops.aws as well, which has a really good content for you to get started. And I think maybe we can touch upon a couple of other things. So usually when we talk about AWS Analytics services, we broadly classified into four different verticals. One is your streaming services, other one is your big data services. Streaming services, when we talk about, we're talking about Kinesis family. We talk about MSKs, which is managed Kafka service, and then right Kafka itself. Thereafter, we are having this big data services, which is EMR, Glue, and Athena, and then we are having this data warehouse, which is our Redshift, and then we are having the visualization service, which is the QuickSight. So this is the broad spectrum look like, and each service that you able to find there are Ram itself he runs immersion day events, right? So there are events page which is being available. We're able to share that event page with you too, which talk about like okay what are events which we are conducting as a solution architect to learn. There are tons of YouTube video which is being available, which is being posted itself. And one biggest, I think one of the great source for you to learn again is by doing it, right? And you may be asking like, okay, where I should be, or how should I be to start doing hands-on? All right. So immersion day is one of those. Other thing which I personally follow is going to the blogs because blog is it's super rich in terms of the use cases because usually when you write a blog for each of those you try to solve a very specific use cases which customer or customers has encountered. And if you're looking to learn okay how that very particular feature, how that particular integrations look like within AWS, uh, following the big data blog is will be helpful, and that's where you can get started too.
Hey, thanks, Navneet. I just posted the link to the
Okay,
event group.
think okay. This is again. I think there was a question around serverless, right? So maybe Ram, you can shed some light here. So maybe there was a question. We are evaluating Redshift serverless. Can you share your thought on when to go Redshift serverless versus provision?
Okay. So um, the way I would look at is if you are starting with a new use case, my suggestion would be to start with Redshift serverless because at that point in time, you are you have less clarity on what you are looking for, what workloads you are looking for, and things like that. So start with Redshift serverless because Redshift serverless is a very good choice, especially when you are not very clear on what is the workload that you're expecting, as well as when the when you have a lot of peaks and valleys in your workload. For example, let's say you have workloads which are like really high during a couple of hours and then comes down immediately and then it may go up, and it's varying all throughout the week. So when you have serverless, the advantage there is you have an option to you are just looking at the specific queries or basically any workloads that you are running. That's what you are paying for, right? Whereas Redshift provisioned, there also you have an option. If you have a little bit more predictability out there, you have an option to bring up your number of nodes or bring down the number of nodes by elastic rescale. It's a matter of a couple of minutes for you to do that. But there you get a little bit more control. So again, going back to the previous conversation that we had, were different Spark engines, one with a little bit serverless variant of it, and um, uh, a bit of hands-off experience. That's the same case with Redshift serverless and provisioned as well. So provisioned is someone who wants to have more control and would like to tune more knobs. That's what provision goes with. Whereas serverless is more of a hands-off experience where you don't need to worry about any of those things. Just bring in the data, run the queries, and go with it.
Okay, that's interesting. So there is another interesting question came in, and I think this is like talking about a partner. So in AWS, we have to use multiple services to build an entire analytics solution. But Snowflake offering unified platform to build the entire analytics solution. Is there any plan to build services for entire analytics solution using single service? that's that's
Yeah,
interesting question.
I'll take that question. So again, Snowflake is our partners, and so uh, I'm not going into any comparison. All right, but at the same time, I surely want to touch upon
We
the
don't do the
philosophy that
comparison,
we
right?
operate with, right?
Right. It's
Yeah.
not make sense to do the comparison in that case.
Exactly. That's not intended to do the comparison. But at the same time, we should look at it from what is that you want to implement. Now, one thing that you will see is, let me take the since we were talking about Redshift in the previous question. Let me take the example of Redshift, right? So Redshift is a data warehouse. Now, what if you want to bring in data that is streaming from Kafka and Kinesis? Now, do you want to use Redshift? So there is a separate streaming service which is streaming the data in, right? But there is a seamless integration between that streaming service and Redshift to bring that data in and see that data in a couple of seconds from a streaming source. Similarly, let's say you have a machine learning use case. Now, there's a separate service called SageMaker, which can create your models and run machine learning models and things like that. But within Redshift, what you can do is you can create a machine learning model which behind the scenes uses SageMaker and still have the flexibility for you to still stay within Redshift itself and utilize the capability of a service which is really good at doing that. So, what we are trying to get to is there are services which are really good at what it is doing. Now, what we focus on is making sure that these services are so integrated, like really integrated well, so that you don't really need to necessarily know that, for example, when you are using Redshift ML, you don't need to know that there is a SageMaker behind the scenes. All what you need to know is how to run a create model statement like a create table statement and run the prediction. But behind the scenes, it is making use of SageMaker. So, or what I'm trying to get to is you will see that integration with various services and still be able to be at one service and make use of all of that and achieve your use cases or cater to your use cases. So that's the philosophy that we operate with.
Yeah, I think this. I'm getting this question is coming from like a having the builder mentality versus having like user mentality, like where I've seen customer, hey, we have this bunch of services which integrate together really well, and then you build a solution, whereas you're having the single solution which is offering everything. So as Ram has mentioned, right, when you have a solution that kind of a single solution that limits what you're able to do with that particular service, right? Whereas you have a service which is very purpose built for that particular use cases that we able to get a lot more value. In terms of ease of use, as Ram has mentioned, we are constantly working, and again, on AWS, we do anything is totally based on the customer feedback. So if you feel like, okay, you need a single service to do everything, do reach out to your account team and provide a feedback, and we definitely gonna listen. But just answer to your question before we wrap is we are constantly working to make your job easy and to make the use of AWS services easy. with that, so thank you very much for joining our session. Hopefully, we're going to get interact with you in the future as well. Thanks to our producer and entire AWS community. Keep building.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone.